Welcome to the Louisa Project 2027, where we discuss education, entrepreneurship, and innovation. I'm your host, Michael Redwine, and today we're going to have our second of two interviews we had with, the second half of an interview we had, or discussion we had with Brandon Sutton of Project Sanity. This week we're going to finish up by discussing measuring poverty in education, measuring the impacts of poverty in education. So check it out. Hope you enjoy it. See you on the other side. All right. Now we're going to move on to what this whole thing was supposed to be about. Okay.
We still got time. I
Education
got
Drive,
time.
one of the many education websites. All right, cool. All right, one of the many education websites on the internets, on the interwebs, the global place we call the interwebs. All right, Education Drive. They had an article written by Mr. Jared Carter on August 8th. It's called "Measuring the Impact of Poverty in Education." The U.S. Department of Education looks to take a lead at eradicating the issue. Okay, so we touched on it a little bit throughout our conversation, especially during the part about the Green Party's answers to three points in order to help fix poverty and help fix education issues in America, and fixing poverty is part of that. One of the biggest things that came across in reading the article, and like I said, it's on Education Drive. Take a look at it. Is that we are finally wrapping our heads around the impact of poverty on education. Starting to wrap it. It should have been just a logical part of how we talk. Like if you're hungry, you don't think as well, right? If you're worried about where you're going to sleep or where you're going to eat, you're not going to be a good student. That's just the way the world works, right? Are there people that can beat those circumstances? Absolutely. But are they rare? Absolutely. Okay. So we're going to get a little bit into this article. Starts off talking about a conference call with Education Secretary John King. All right, and discussing the Every Student Succeeds Act, which is supposed to replace No Child Left Behind. All right.
It's a bad
Huh?
The Every Child Should Succeed Act is not that great. It's like
Yeah.
it leads to a lot of
I see.
a lot of venture philanthropy, a lot of vulture philanthropy.
And that's one thing I noticed is I'm a bit of an entrepreneur, so personally I'm a fan of that. But overall, I think in without maybe a little more oversight and organization from the federal government, I think it can go awry. Poor oversight is where a lot of money gets poured down the drain. Well, it gets captured, we'll say. All right.
Yeah.
So that's a big issue. But Brandon, what do you know about the Every Student Succeeds Act? I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot. Can you riff on that a little bit? I'll cut it out if you can't.
Well, no, I mean, okay, so the Every Child Should Succeed Act, which I always forget what the ESSA stands for. I usually just call it the Read Act. But it's meant to replace was finally
it's Every Student Succeeds Act. I got it right.
Yeah.
I got a paper.
Every Student Succeeds Act was meant to, like you said, meant to replace No Child Left Behind, which was, a whole scale failure. It led to a lot of teaching to the test. It led to a lot of schools being No Child Left Behind to this. It led to a lot of schools being closed. So basically, the premise behind No Child Left Behind, in case you don't know, but in case your watchers don't know, was that we would institutionalize these sort of minimum standards that we would test kids at various stages of their education career. And the theory was that we would be able to successfully, target the schools in the most need and send extra help there. But the way it actually worked was the schools that needed the most help were just basically closed. They were scapegoated as being part of bad neighborhoods. They were scapegoated as having bad teachers, and they never really engaged with any part of the system that led to these schools being bad in the first place. So like the property tax issue. Then upon President Obama taking over in office, he instituted this new program that pledged to give us, I believe it was $1 billion in funds to schools for innovation. So basically schools would try to, it would, put forward an innovation pitch. I'm sorry, this is off the top of my head. I have notes on this, but I just talked about it specifically. Would
That's
innovate,
all
and
good.
you could apply for grants due to innovation. And I think, the idea of innovation, especially the ability for public institutions to innovate and not need to be charter schools, not need to be, private school, that the public sector can effectively innovate without having outside support from the private industry, it needs to be emphasized here, because after Reagan, the idea of the public sector being anything other than a problem and and stagnant and moochers has been just been part of our collective cultural consciousness as we turn to public education. And so now that every student succeeds act is the fundamental replacement of the No Child Left Behind Act, and I guess you would say the ultimate culmination of President Obama's sort of I can't think of the act specifically, initiative to give money to schools who are willing to innovate in their districts. And the act itself, it has a bunch of I know this is going to be vague because it's relative. It's an act. It's relatively long. The one that sticks has a bunch of sort of statutes in it. The one that sticks out to me is the ones that stick out to me are a recalibration of the testing regime that we have now. So sort of removal of these kinds of not enough removal, but re-examination of the kind of intensive testing regime we have. And the second is the ability for, and this is why I call it vulture philanthropy, which is the ability for private industries and private philanthropists to what is essentially bet on the quality of the school and have more control over it. So you see this with Mark Zuckerberg. You see this with a few people who are now investing in schools in certain parts of the country, where they can basically, I don't want to say put a lien on the school, but they can basically invest in the success of a school and receive some sort of monetary reward for a school doing better. And I mean, from my perspective, it's a step in the right direction, but less. I'd like to see a federal oversight not in terms of curriculum or in terms of getting more private public partnerships, but in terms of actually correcting the structural inequality that exists in funding and the structural inequality that exists in communities. I'm less interested in these sort of I mean, it's in the ESSA Act is also some stuff about like school lunches and blah 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 blah. But I'd like to see more tackling of the social welfare, the social
more
welfare
broad structure, yeah.
More broad structure of poor communities than particularly any one, like just more targeted legislation at schools in general.
Okay. All right. So,
but that was a pretty vague answer.
No, but I mean, hey, you're doing better than me. We're doing good. All right. So, one of the things they talked about was rising homelessness. Well, like you said, if we're not going to tackle the homelessness, this is just a Band-Aid, right? And we're not going to tackle the homelessness and poverty. If we're not going to tackle that more broadly, like you said, it's going to be hard to fix the inequalities. Could some of the things they're going to try in this, could they help? Absolutely. But if you're not going to tackle these base issues, like revitalizing the social programs, like the Green Party's talking about, it's going to be hard. All right, so I'm gonna move on directly to some of the specific points within the article. For instance, like we talked about the hunger issue, or something we didn't talk about, and they vaguely mentioned it here, the healthcare issue, right? Kids that don't have decent healthcare, may or may not be homeless, food insecurity, all these things build in, and they have biochemical effects on the human body, on the human brain, right? We're looking at a lot of lead poisoning issues in the country. Finally, Flint finally woke folks up, and they started testing their water, and there's some serious issues going on with lead poisoning in this country. So, especially in communities of color. So, they talked about the risk factors and how they impact these kids biochemically, and it hurts their ability to learn. And it also hurts them as far as behavior is concerned, right? There's a lot more impulsive behavior because of this combination of factors, this witch's brew, so to speak, of factors that these children live in, right? And what I don't know how much if anything, this particular act can do about that overall. Will there be some pockets where they can help? I'm sure they can. Why am I talking? I got you about this.
Okay, so one of the more important parts of ESSA that I do agree with, that is, that besides the removal of the sort of federal, the removal of the strict federal oversight of these high risk standardized tests to a state defined one, is the desire to get local communities more active in the school system, in their schools, to engage with I'm sorry, at that, what we would call that is, engaging the community as stakeholders, making them understand that they are stakeholders in the success of the school district. And when you talk about, but again, this comes down to the same problems that are affecting the kids are also affecting the parents. So now we're talking about generational poverty. Now we're talking about the generational, like if you didn't get a good education, why
you can't help your child get a better education? Yeah.
In the same neighborhood, like if your education was garbage in the same neighborhood, like the way you understand education is going to be so much different. It's so much different. You're going to value it much differently than someone who does understand education. And so, again, ESSA is putting forward the same kind of language that No Child Left Behind did. Although now it's saying that unlike No Child Left Behind, but now they're saying that they're gonna use these. I think they call them opportunity indicators. So schools are allowed to, and districts are allowed to set their own opportunity indicator that is meant to indicate the success of the school, and again help target schools that need more help. But we still have to get to the point where we actually give that help. And how are we going to give that help? How are we going to actually help the school? Are we just going to funnel more money into it? Because at a certain point, we have to say, yeah, money is a key indicator of a child, and how much investment the school is able to make into a child is indicator of success. But money in that kind of targeted way is not going to solve some of the other problems. So you talk about the biochemistry of it. Like, I don't know how new this article is, but this is some stuff that I was hearing about when I was an undergraduate. And like the hormone that they the hormone they talk about a lot is cortisol, which is a stress hormone.
Yeah, and that's in here.
Cortisol. So cortisol, from an evolutionary standpoint, is meant to do a lot of things. It's meant to keep you alive. It increases your adrenaline. It's part of your fight or flight response. It's part of your stress response. It's meant to keep your heart racing, to kind of mute some of your senses, to take away from the higher function of your brain, so you can better handle small bursts of intense danger. So like a tiger is attacking, or you're about to get hit by a car, or something that you need to be able to react fastly. You need to have like more of that hormone. That's what that hormone does. But what science has shown us is that extended exposure to that hormone by constantly being in high risk scenarios, which we would consider poverty a high risk scenario. Housing insecurity, a high risk scenario. Food insecurity, a high risk scenario. It causes cortisol to be constantly emitted because you're constantly worried. You're constantly stressed. You're constantly, and that prevents the development of the brain in children. So extended exposure to cortisol in children has been shown to mute brain function in the long run. So if you go through housing insecurity from when you're young, from 8 to 18, or from 1 to 18, your development is going to be stunted by that constant release of cortisol into your system.
My understanding is that's a big issue with folks that have been in war zones, is that a lot of these young kids display a lot of the symptoms of PTSD because of the consistently elevated level of cortisol and as you said, other hormones that regulate your function in times of high stress. And it also kills brain cells and risk factors for depression and anxiety and anger control. Impulsivity, all kinds of stuff. And we know this, as you said, this is not new. But and you have children, and you know, this is always the excuse that you hear from conservatives. All these kids are uncontrollable in class. Well, science will tell you why. We need to do something about that. You know, I hear recently here in Huntsville, Alabama, the Huntsville City Schools, they just instituted everybody gets a free breakfast, right? Because Huntsville is a bit of a liberal bastion as far as education is concerned, because, you know, the white folks want their kids educated, right? It's a bit of a liberal bastion here in Huntsville. So they said, okay, because they kept getting pushed back from feeding poor kids. So they said, okay, we won't just feed poor kids with money. If you want breakfast, you come get it, right? And that kind of shut people down. What are you going to do? What do you do? Okay, everybody, okay, you kind of shut up. But why are we here? You know, how did we get to the point? Well, I know how we got here, but a bunch of hate. But why should it be so hard to say, let's feed a kid? It's not their fault they're hungry. You know, you always hear people shouldn't have kids they can't take care of. We just had an economic crash. We've got centuries of economic deprivation. This didn't happen overnight. You know, okay, I'm getting upset. Let's move on to the next one.
Well, I mean,
views of poverty.
I'm gonna answer a question because I fudged up the ESSA question because it's a bit amorphous what ESSA does, other than reduce testing regime, give more power back.
Yeah, but until the regulations are written, it's gonna be amorphous. But go ahead.
Yeah,
until they complete.
So just to sum up ESSA, reduce testing regime, do the things that No Child Left Behind was supposed to do, give power back to the communities, try to engage communities more, and like let private industry invest in schools more, for more innovation in those communities. But why is it so hard to feed kids? My theory is this, and I think this is a pretty good answer to your question because it applies almost any. Kids are only kids if they are conceived and live in certain situations. And I think that as a society, it comes down to humanization. We don't see kids as children unless they have a certain set of criteria attached to them. Kids who are born to a middle class family, nuclear family, male versus female, male and female, one mother, one father, in wedlock, married, Christian, probably white. You don't got to be white anymore. You just got to be middle class. I'll be fair. And every other kid is something else. Kids of Mexican immigrants are anchor babies. Like how could kids who come, refugee kids are just, they're illegal immigrants, even though they're refugees seeking asylum. Black kids are pre-criminals. They're welfare babies. Yeah, they're welfare babies. They're a way for a welfare queen to get extra money from the government. And so these are not children to the eyes of a lot of people. These are symbols of things. These are symbols of the deviance of certain members of society, like who in our era of rugged individualism are just unwilling to take care of their own concerns. Like they need the state to help them take care of their kids. And it's like we all need the state to help us take care of our kids. That's why we have public education. That's why we have roads. That's why the state funds hospitals. It's like that's.
But this is all a structure built to keep us from helping people, right? Because there's only certain people we want to help, so we're going to build these structures to make it look as if these people are undeserving, right? Absolutely. But my thing is, if you can't find a way to say that a child is deserving, no matter what their circumstances are, then we should be questioning your humanity. That's my issue, right?
And that's the thing.
Yeah, and that bothers me immensely. And one of the things that kind of makes me feel a little bit better in this article, they talked about views of poverty, that kids understand that there are bad schools and there are good schools, whichever side of the spectrum they're on, right? Kids see the inherent unfairness of the entire system. And it's very good that kids see that. I guess it's maybe because we're so connected, right? No matter what their parents say about why that is, they can see the unfairness of the inherent unfairness of the system, which kind of helps me feel a little bit better about the future of this country. And I have to give it to you, you millennials, makes me feel a whole lot better about the future of this country, because you guys are
specifically.
Well, maybe not you, but you millennials in general, more broadly, millennials. But you guys make me feel a lot better about the future of the country, because you guys are willing to stand up and fight. You know, my generation before me, they were like, okay, the grown folks will handle it. We're going to go to college, you know, or go on about our life.
I think a certain amount of millennials are just, are angry and they're fed up. And not only are they fed up with the system, I'm going to talk about that after, but they're fed up of being scapegoated. Because no offense to the baby boomers, but the baby boomers are a scapegoat generation. They
left a mess. They left a mess.
They are the worst when it comes to scapegoating other people for the problem of society. How often you hear, well, the reason we have this problem is because millennials don't vote. It's like, we didn't do it though. It's like, how do you blame a generation who was raised in the aftermath of a rigged election for having no faith in the electoral system? Because like the first election I remember, first election that I remember was 2000. Because in 2000, I was 9.
That's a horrible experience to go through.
Yeah,
but go ahead.
I'm 25, so in 2000 I was 9.
Mm-hmm.
In the year 2000, I was 9 years old, and I remember in the aftermath of that, just the constant talk about the unfairness, the rigging of the system. I remember being 9 and thinking, like, how do you win the popular vote but lose the presidency? Having to have long conversations in my 5th grade or 6th grade class at the time, I can't remember, how the electoral college works. And it's like, imagine that being your first experience of the election. Like the first election that most people my age can remember is the 2001. And that's a really bad election to remember.
Yeah, and kids have a very strong sense of fairness, right? It's beaten out of them through over time. It's beaten out of them over time. Luckily, your generation is not. It hasn't been beaten out of them as much as previous generations, right? Yeah, life is unfair. That's what my generation said. Life is not fair. Work harder.
We teach kids socialism. We teach kids in kindergarten socialism, and then we do our best to teach it out of them. It's like we teach our kids to share what you have, to be good,
clean up together, to get the clean up song,
to split things evenly, to be fair, to not hit, to do all these things. And at a certain point, I think maybe 8th grade, we turn everything into a competition. And we say, okay.
Well, it's earlier than that. Pee Wee football, baby. That's where it starts. Pee Wee sports.
Like
that's when it gets ugly. Yeah.
Like now you're in competition with one another. Like now you're all competing to go to Harvard. You're all competing to get that scholarship. You're all competing for this. You're all competing for that. And I mean, I think that is one of my biggest pet peeves. Besides when people say the system, and I talked to Mr. Baraka about this, and the need for people to start taking responsibility for the way America is, and stop saying the system. Like there is this thing above us all that controls our actions that we are not responsible for. Because when people say the system, just like when Elizabeth Warren said the system is rigged at the DNC, like they're just trying to make a problem abstract. They want to make a problem no one's fault. But when we talk about the racism in school, the racism in in police, we talk about racism in policing, racism in the depth gap between black and white people, specifically the depth gap between black and white women when it comes to breast cancer and cancer treatment.
Breast cancer, yeah, absolutely.
Like, we're talking about structures that are built upon the way we think about each other on an everyday level. Like we're not talking about, and of course these structures reinforce our sort of prejudices, but these structures are built on our prejudices. You can't possibly, no one should ever be allowed to live in a situation where they believe that these racist laws could exist, sans the majority of society thinking they are right at some level. Because that is it. That's just it. The majority of society thinks. I mean, of course, there are laws right now, marijuana laws for one, that are sort of being forced down our throats. They just to borrow from, Republican.
The Tea Party, yeah.
Everything crammed down your throat. But for the most part, at the social level, we think these things are right, and they are just, and they are fair, and they get cemented into they become reality. Our cultural are these little microaggressions, and that's what they are. But people don't want to talk about how microaggressions become structural racism, which is the point. How do
constant reinforcement? Yeah.
How do microaggressions cement themselves as institutional environment and material racism? And it's just, it's people repeating the same things over and over again. Well, maybe it's people saying maybe the cops and Black people need to come together and find middle ground. It's just like, what are you talking about? Like what are you talking about? Like, and so at some point we all need to take responsibility for being racist. We all need to take responsibility for being sexist and say, okay, these things could not exist sans mass racism. Of course, to different degrees, but there's that kernel.
From acceptance to cheerleading. Yeah, absolutely.
It's common sense. That's what the law is. The law is codified common sense to a certain extent, and we have to engage with that.
Yeah, and we have to be honest about that. And that leads us to this other piece talking in the article talking about how states are falling short, right? But it goes back to this issue where with the local property taxes paying for schools being a big chunk of how schools are funded, right? Okay, there's a little federal funding, there's a little state funding, but the bulk of it is local funding.
Absolutely. So just to end that statement. So for people who don't know, it breaks down to be about 40, 20. So it's like it's about 45% local, 40% state, and then about 15 to 20%, federal money that goes into school districts for the most part. Yeah.
And another piece that a lot of people don't talk about, which was pointed out to me today by a conservative, no less, a lot of schools and better communities also will have the parents and local community as a resource, right? So if there's a lot of money in your community, you can have these big fundraisers and raise a lot of money because there's a lot of money available. That money's not available in poor communities, right? So that's another issue. I get it. I'm not saying don't raise funds for your kid in your school. I'm not saying don't do that, but it is part of the issue of inequality.
Yeah. So and I guess sorry, I should have mentioned that. So you say I'm forcing my statement. In some districts, like up to like 5% of the budget can come from those kind of fundraising. So those car washes and bake sales and sort of we're having a drive to buy new books. So maybe up to like 10% can come from stuff like that, and they can be used to cover.
But in some areas, it's probably like 0% because parents just don't have it.
And you talk about the so one of the things that I study is the competition between local communities, not necessarily communities, but like local school boards or school districts versus the state government and versus the federal government. And so a lot of times what you see is your local community school board, especially in poor towns and poor counties, because some counties altogether are just poor. There are no good schools.
They don't have anything. Yeah, absolutely.
Or like they'll pool all their money for one good high school. They have one good high school. Yeah, and you see, and they are desperate to get communities to become engaged in the school district because they see that as a way to boost their power and to resist outside domination. So in New York State, for example, a lot of the state money, as per Governor Cuomo, is an act that that was passed after 2008's housing crisis as a way to cover the the shortfall in taxes. They took money from schools but they tied school funding to certain standards that had to be met that some districts can't meet, and some districts don't feel they're necessary to meet, and some districts, for whatever reason, they just want their own autonomy to set their own standards. And so there is that competition between your local school board and the state government for just the ability to govern their own, to say what's best for their own communities.
For better or for worse.
For better or for worse.
Yeah. I saw a. Here we go riffing again. I watched on Netflix. I watched a documentary about a school board in Texas. As you know, Texas dictates a good chunk of how textbooks are written in the country, and it was just watching these people, take slavery out of the fact that many of the founding fathers were slave owners and how bad slavery was, just taking it right out of. Just sitting right in front of us, changing history, right? And it was just, and the scariest part was the people did this with a straight face. It was like, there's this one guy, little nerdy guy with a mustache. Those are the guys you got to watch. This little nerdy dude was in charge of this whole effort, and he was just putting this stuff in, taking stuff out, and he was just saying it as if it was matter of fact. These are the facts on the ground, But I'm like, that's not the facts. What are you doing? But I wish I could remember the name of the movie. But it's just amazing to watch how, and to me, it's tantamount to child abuse, because you're not preparing your child for a future in the real world, right? You're building a child who's going to be poorly informed, and he's going to look like a fool in the future if they believe this crap.
Well, I mean, in the short term, yeah, but you got to understand what schools are for. Schools are for, from the progressive standpoint, from any standpoint, really, from any standpoint, they are, they are little laboratories where you build the next generation from the ground up, where you put the ideas in the social situations and the material situations into the heads of the next generation, and and you control what the next generation thinks. That's what integration was. That's what integration was, of integration of schools. It was saying, and the next generation should not think about race as much. So we're gonna force people to go to school together. And so yeah, in the short term, people will look at the people who don't think slavery was that bad and laugh. But in the long term, that'll just become the facts. It's like, you look at history and archive making and history and all other things, how we record history. I guess historiography is less about the recreation of objective truth, and more about teaching the creation of facts. Like this is epistemological relativism. This is how we create facts, and you create facts by teaching them to the generation after generation until they believe them. I mean, how much of what we learn in schools now is not true? Like how much of the
that's a good question. Over the years, what was changed and what's absolutely.
Like, how much of think about things that we, so for example, for how long were American kids taught that race was biological, that race was something that there were only two genders, that I can't think of any other examples right now, but like there are only two genders, that homosexuality was a choice. It was sexual before orientation was sexual preference. And now that in my generation, I would say it was perhaps the first generation where it was just like, okay, race is a social construct, gender is a social construct, and we weren't taught exactly what that means. Homosexuality is not a choice. It's it's part biology, part environment. It's not totally understood right now, but one day we will understand it. But it's, for sure, it is not, for the majority of cases, it is not a choice. It's just it's just as legitimate as every other thing, any other sort of persuasion. There's not two genders. There's not only straight and gay. There's a myriad of the spectrum. And so now we see sort of the conflicts between generations now about what constitutes facts. And as it comes to specifically gender, what are the facts about gender, and but that'll eventually go away. It'll go away broadly speaking, and they might still have pockets of people who believe gender is the binary, but ultimately it will just go away. It goes away slowly, but it goes away. So so you find yourself in these points in history where the facts have changed because we decided they've changed. Because we know more, because we want different things. We want our reality to be different, so we change the facts that we teach people. So you have to be wary. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
You have to be wary of thinking, who will ever believe this stuff? It's like, who could possibly ever believe these things? Because one day everyone will. One day everyone will.
I remember the day. I remember, well, not the day, but I was learning. It was in grammar school. We were learning about Egypt, and I didn't know it then, but I went to good schools. I went to good private schools, right? And I guess quote unquote good. I guess that's where I'm getting to now. But if I made it through, I made it through. But I remember we talked about Egypt, and I did not know Egypt was part of Africa. That was not part of the curriculum. It was just Egypt. It was just the shape of the map of Egypt, and everything around it was either grayed out or it wasn't there. Egypt was treated separate entity than the rest of Africa, and I was like, and now that I lived in Egypt for a while, and it kind of brought to mind that, wow, what else, like you said, what else book is kind of gained, I guess what it is.
Well, I mean,
I don't know. I don't know. Go ahead.
The maps that we use aren't to scale. They portray America.
Yeah, that's very true.
Being much bigger than it actually is.
Yeah, exactly. Africa's bigger than North America.
So
it's crazy.
It's like it's these small skewing the perspective that people don't really notice, but they've internalized. And that by making America the center of the map, by making it much bigger than other countries, you make a subtle statement about its importance.
Yeah. Yeah. All right.
Next topic.
Yeah, we keep riffing, but that's what we do apparently. All right. Now, what we talked about a lot, and a lot of it, luckily, that we asking that question to Jill Stein and Ajama Baraka about this 3-point plan for fixing education. It kind of answers a lot of our questions, right? Working toward and part of that working towards solutions, right? So in this, because of the way by our article, that's it. We're gonna measuring the impact of poverty in education on Education Drive. It's written by Jared Carter on August 8th, 2016. Really good article. It'll help you pick up your empathy. To turn your empathy genes back on.
Well, I'll share.
Go ahead.
Well, I'll share experience with you because I'm the guest, so I said I had a personal experience with something like this, and I thought it would be
please do.
important to share. So there are a lot of programs that exist to sort of to improve teaching in these communities, and one such program is Teach for America. And I applied for Teach for America when I was an undergraduate because I thought, and I remember very vividly applying, because I applied with another one of my friends, two of my friends actually. One who was a Central American immigrant, fluent in several languages, well, not several, but Spanish. She spoke Spanish, French, and English fluently. And
that's several.
Yeah, so that's several. And I remember speaking to my advisor at the time, who was an African American historian. And I told him, I'm applying to Teach for America. And he told me, well, good luck with that, because they really are they have a very kind of skewed perspective on teaching. They view it kind of like, they view it a lot like Peace Corps. Like they are sending people they are sending people into these communities to civilize them. Like, they the natives, you go with the natives. And so I remember my interview, and I totally bombed my interview, because the interview was the question I bombed was, your students aren't doing well. What do you do? And this is how I know this article is not new information, because I basically rattled out that with information in the article. I was like, there's only so much you can do when kids spend very little time in a school. It's very hard to teach kids, kids who are hungry, who are housing insecure, who are dealing with these issues outside of school, who come to school. It's unreasonable to expect them to just be ready to turn on and learn. That's not reasonable. And so of course I listed all of this literature on the cortisol and stress hormones and how it affects child development and education. And that didn't go over well. But it didn't go over well. I can't say for sure, but it wasn't the answer they were looking for. That's not the answer that they're looking for. Because my answer was basically fatalistic. Like, there's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can really do. So I can understand why that's not the answer you want to hear from your a person teacher. Like, there's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can do specifically as a teacher. I mean, there are some things you can do. You can do your best. But at a certain point, you're fighting an uphill battle. But between you can't overcome someone's 75% of someone's life. And within,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So one of the things we like to do on the show, because it's about entrepreneurship and innovation, is we kind of like to brainstorm solutions, right? We talked about these solutions. We talked about the 3-point plan from the Green Party. What from your experience, from your education, what else do you think can help, if you have anything, or do you want to go more deeply into the 3 things that the Green Party said, or do you have a solution rallying around your head that you're still formulating that you want to talk about?
Well, I think we have to.
Not so much. I'm not talking about a silver bullet, but it could be a broad spectrum of solutions.
I think the solution to this problem is the solution to to a lot of problems in our society, and that is to understand that communities have unique needs. So and to do our best to engage these communities, and to do so with an open mind and in good faith. So it's not enough to say, okay, well, we need you all to come to this this parent-teacher conference meeting. We need you all to come to the school board meeting or the school district meeting and air your grievances but we're also not really putting the money there, putting the support of the state there. So we need to have we need to meet people halfway. The state needs to demonstrate that it's willing to listen, it's willing to innovate, but it's also willing to put money behind these solutions. That you can't bring people in and want them to just air their grievances and then get over them. You have to actually, be willing to demonstrate your commitment to change, to fair and equitable education. Because that's really how you engage, you engage stakeholders in the community. You say, okay, we have this institution here, whether it be the police or a school or a hospital or a bus line or whatever. And we want to know your opinions about it. We want to know, based on your expert, position the members of the community as experts. Like, they know what's best for their community, or rather they have an idea about it. But be willing to accept their expertise about their own lives. And when they come to
see them as a resource, absolutely.
See them as a resource. See them as a legitimate resource, not just to be mobilized as as cannon fodder for battles with larger bodies, but to say, okay, well, you think that the school bus should make more stops. You think that the music program should be expanded. You think that this school needs not only a basketball team, but needs a lacrosse team. It needs a pee-wee football team. It needs we need to put more money into the arts program. We need a recording studio. Or hey, you know what? I'm willing to be a pessimist about this, because I guess this is like, we need a nursery because we have a lot of teen pregnancies. And one of the big, and a lot of our young female students are dropping out of school because they don't have anyone to watch their kids. So we need a nursery.
Child care is a huge issue, yeah.
So at a certain point, we and take the cops out of schools. Take the cops out of schools. Demand, you also pay, again, silver bullet. Pay for the quality you want. When it comes to teachers, you can't demand teachers have a certain number, a certain be good, but want to recruit them directly out of grad school or directly out of undergraduate and then pay them $25,000, $40,000 a year. You want good teachers, pay them more. If you want an $80,000 teacher, you pay them $80,000.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's it. And paying them $80,000, you demand more from them. You demand that they have a few courses, a few credits in social work. You demand that they have a few courses in X, Y, and Z, a few courses in early childhood development, a few courses in child psychology. One of my big pet peeves, and I think that should be instituted, is that if your district has a certain population of immigrants who speak a second language at, say, let's say 10% of your 7% or more your district speaks a foreign language, you should have foreign language teachers in your school. If 7% of your district is Ukrainian, and they're learning Ukrainian at home and coming to school, it's unacceptable to put them in special ed classes because they don't speak that language. So that's unacceptable. We need teachers who speak these languages. So I guess
the school, I think it was in Massachusetts, right? They had an immigrant community, and most of it was like laborers who came to the town to build this town, and there's they had a lot of children, and what they did was they had a mostly white side of town, and these kids came together to go to school. What the school was originally doing was they would stick the Hispanic kids, the Spanish speaking kids, they would stuck them in classes, just amongst themselves. And I guess at the end of the day, it was like a special ed class, right? You get this set of education, everybody else is going to move on and go on about their business. But what happened eventually, they had a new school administrator came and said, okay, we're going to have classes. We're going to put all these kids together, and we're going to have classes in both languages, every class, every day, forcing these kids to learn each other's languages. And to my mind, it was brilliant. I was like, wow, it's just mind blowing, right? And now both sides are bilingual, right?
Integration.
Wow, actual integration, right? So now both sides are bilingual. The overall community of the school. It's not just the school, but the overall community grew from that, because now these kids, the white kids are translating for their parents, so the parents and other parents can get together. They were no longer as segregated, and the value of learning two languages, that's money, that's valuable, and nobody lost. That I was so excited. Listen, I was like, wow, that is brilliant. Integrating these classes, everybody learns a second language. Nobody loses. They get tested in both languages. They get tested in each particular language, and everybody's growing from this. Instead of everybody's in their silo, stay away, right? Everybody benefited from the actual integration of the school. I just wanted to share that. I thought it was an amazing
No,
story.
absolutely, and I think that that lesson from that is that schools can integrate. Integrate. Yeah. Schools can integrate, but public institutions can innovate. There is no reason why, there needs to be a sort of top-down, one-size-fits-all education system in America. There's no reason why. I guess that's the best part about this new ESSA Act, amongst the garbage, is that it recognizes that there are many paths to the same goal, which is a complete society. And again, progressive education philosophy says that the goal of education is to have a complete society, not necessarily complete citizens. So people who are the best at, people are given the best chance to be the best at what they consider to be their expertise, and that makes society stronger. The valuation of multiple types of learning and expertise and knowledge bases. Because let's be honest, you can't have a society of all engineers. So why do we pretend
that's dumb, number one.
I'm not saying you shouldn't pay engineers more than janitors, but I'm not. But although maybe you shouldn't. I don't know. But
I work with engineers every day. I said I'm for the janitors. Go janitors.
But what I'm saying is that don't pretend like you could live without one better than the other. Because I would much rather live in a society with sanitation workers than one with a lot of doctors. Because in one situation you're gonna have a lot more disease than the other situation. So I think that it comes down to being able to really, really engage with multiple types of pedagogy, so multiple types of learning and learning styles, and multiple legitimate education goals, for communities and also individuals. But of course, I would never say people should not learn how to read. People should not learn how to do math to a certain level.
Yeah.
People should not learn basic science. You should. And I mean, and what I would consider to be a reasonable amount of science for people to learn is up to that bar, up to 10th grade. So basically that would be pre-calc for most people in math, physics. I'm sorry, yeah, not physics. Sorry, chem and biology, and maybe a little physics for science. So keep doing science. You should do science. Do science, weirdos. Or maybe science selectives like horticulture or botany, stuff like that. Like people who want to, people interested in. I'm just saying that it's possible for the state to innovate. It's possible for communities to innovate and to do it properly. And but proper innovation requires proper communication between the institution and the community, and that has to be done in good faith.
Yeah, it definitely has to be done in good faith. That's the biggest piece, and I think a big part of that is having some healthy minimums, right? You have to have a certain you have to have a minimum of X, Y, and Z in order to be taken seriously, right? Because a lot of one of the big problems Here is, here, I guess a lot of states is a problem because, hold on a second. One of the big problems is that folks don't want the Common Core because they really don't want everybody to learn, right? And that's one of the big reasons why they don't want Common Core. We don't. I'm not saying that's the reason for a lot of people, but a lot of folks see this as, okay, this is a competitive issue, right? If my kids are learning and they're not, that means my kids got a better chance.
Yeah, but
I mean, go ahead.
I'm interrupting you a lot. It's your show, and I feel so bad. But I'm gonna keep doing.
Don't feel bad. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay. So, but yeah, and I guess that is one of my second pet peeve today that I'm gonna talk about is the way we've turned everything in society into a competition.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess my best example is the way bringing us back to schools again, because this is education.
Yeah.
We talk about affirmative action in America,
mm-hmm.
as like we are helping. It's the big analogy. It's a race. We're helping people get to the same start. Have the same benefit in a race. I don't want to be equal in a race. Like I want to win that race. Like
mm-hmm.
if you frame affirmative action or any really of these like sort of help a different community policies through capitalist neoliberal competition, no one would be in favor of them, because like no one is interested in helping people have a better chance at beating you at something.
Mm-hmm.
It comes down to like a fundamental shift in the way we frame these programs as not being legs up for individuals, but legs up for our society. So you talk
the entire
about
society, absolutely, yeah.
So
that's how I view it, yeah.
Yeah. So before affirmative action was affirmative action, before it was for Black people and for women and for I guess the LGBTQ community, it was just social programs that helped society benefit. Like affirmative action at its most fundamental core is simply policies and legislation that benefits one group over another group. So you say the homestead to the benefit one group either to the detriment or to the exclusion of the other group. So you say the Homestead Act of the 1800s was affirmative action for white people going to the West.
Yeah, absolutely.
The inability for Black people to vote, for women to vote, was affirmative action for white land owning males. And of course, it's not until these programs are expanded and targeted to like the people who aren't as traditionally valued that they become problems. But before that, it was just like this is what we do for our society to be healthy, and that needs to be the way we reclaim affirmative action and really make a good case for expanded affirmative action, expanded social programs. And you say, listen, in a society where 13% of the populace, or I don't know how much the populace is just minority in general, so you say Latinos and Blacks together. Or Native people together, so basically brown people together. So you say 25% of the population, 25, 30% of the population of a country is not being utilized or valued or educated or allowed to participate to their full capabilities. Like that society is not as productive, it's not as free, it's not as democratic, it's not as wealthy as it could possibly be. So it's not as though white people win in a racist system. No, they just do better. Like no one wins in a racist system, and that's that goes back to MLK, where he says racism, prejudice is a congenital disorder. When you're within a system, the failure of one part of that system, whether it's your body, you talk about your heart being bad, but your lungs being fine, whether it's your car, your transmission's bad, but your battery's fine. That whole system is not as productive as it could be. And so you talk about, okay, well, yeah, theoretically you are competing with this Black person for this one job. But in a more free society, a more equal society, there'd be much more jobs. There'd be many more. There'd be Black people who are willing to hire you. There'd be women who'd be willing to hire you. You're looking at this at a very small scale because that's the way it's been framed as an individual argument. And we need to go back to stop fighting this thing using their language and start just reframing these questions and say, okay, well, listen. Do you want to live in a society where 30% of the people in that society are unable to ever give you a job, unable to ever have a meaningful conversation with you, unable to effectively contribute, or just because it means that you're more likely to do slightly better but not as well as you could do? No. Like you want to live in a society where everyone is doing the best of their capability, including you. But ultimately, let's be honest, it's the the racism in America, and this is the argument that should have been made by Bernie Sanders more, strongly, in my opinion, is crippling America. Like racism is crippling every part of America. Sexism is crippling every part of America. It's not benefiting anyone. Like objectively, you're doing better, but you're still losing out on things.
Agreed.
So I mean, that's just my two. That's just my two.
Yeah, I agree. I think we talked about it earlier. Is that at some level when you buy into sexism, when you buy into racism or whatever other structural ism we're talking about, when you buy into those things, on some level you're saying, okay, that portion of society really has nothing to offer. On some level, you're that's where you are, right? Yeah. I mean, people can say that, okay, well, that's because of how they act or whatever, whatever bullshit trope they have for the day, right? But because like I said, I have these discussions every day with conservatives, but why? Some of them, they come in my cubicle, right? They get chased out, But I mean, it's on some level they have absolutely given up on communities of color. That's one side. The other side of it is, okay, as long as I keep them at bay, as long as they're the bottom, I can be the top. You know what I mean? There's somebody there to keep me from falling down. But that's not really the case. I mean, maybe emotionally that's how they feel, but obviously that's not really the case.
Yeah, 13th place is not winning. 13th place is just not last.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what needs to be articulated to white America, to middle class America. You're not winning anything, and and you're in danger of,
losing everything.
Losing everything. You're not safe. You're safer. Mm-hmm. And so that needs to be your children aren't safe. I mean, that was Occupy Wall Street. Your children aren't safe. They're safer. Yeah. And you should never. And you've been allowed to believe that you're safe. But not because of racism, but because you deserve it. And now you're being forced to contend with the fact that, hey, life is not fair. And it never was. You would hope that people would be able to extrapolate that out to, oh, well, maybe black people are also being treated unfairly. But small steps.
A little bit at a time.
Small steps. But it comes down to hey, listen, the meritocracy is a fallacy. It's meant to make you feel better about the system.
Man, you can't tell them folks that meritocracy is a fallacy. That's the American way. If conservatives believe that to their core, no matter how you show them it's bullshit, you can show them all the statistics in the world. They believe that to the core. Hard work will get you anything you want in this country. Never mind everything, all the other pieces that build into making a person a success. All those pieces, the education, the healthcare, all these other pieces. No, you worked it out yourself. It's the mindset is mind-boggling. It really is.
Yeah, I wouldn't say hard work isn't important. I would
never say that. But
I would compare it to being on steroids.
Yeah.
I would say, I would compare it to being on steroids. A certain it's like being in a
unpack that, brother.
Well, I would say, hard work, if you're on steroids, hard work is still necessary in order to maximize benefits of that. You have plenty of people who are born rich who fucking fail. Who fail at life.
This is an educational podcast, damn it.
Who fall down, who are born rich, they lose all their money. Mm-hmm. But, there are plenty of people who use steroids who never gain any muscle either. But at a certain point, you have to contend with there are certain people in life who are working hard, and you're being put within the same sort of contest now, and you're competing with people who are not using steroids, basically. You're competing with people who, by function of their the way they were born, are being expected to do the same amount with less, and are being judged as though they are doing the same. They have equal to you, and you're sitting there resting on your laurels. And I mean, you didn't technically cheat, but if the contest allows for steroids, you can cheat, but you can't possibly be allowed to pretend like things were even from the get-go.
But they do.
Because that's called cognitive.
Yeah, it is cognitive dissonance. But it's funny because we had the same conversations over and over and over. We talked about this last week. I sent you facts, you ran out of here, and now you come back here, you argue.
because facts are unimportant. People
that's true. Very true.
So everyone talks about how Americans. I'm going to bring it back to education. Everyone talks about how Americans don't like science, and that's not true. Americans love science. Conservatives love science. Liberals love science. everyone loves being able to pull out a statistic at you and go like, hey, well, black people commit 90% of all crime, which is not a real statistic, but I don't think it's real. Like, if that were a real statistic,
we just quit. Yeah, you're right.
But
all right.
Black people commit, black people make up 13% of the population, but they commit 46% of crime. I think that's the real statistic. Like, ha. And you go, okay, well, so what? And so it's not scientific. The people love science. People love appealing to science for authority. It's just people aren't very literate in science. People don't have science. They're unable to unpack what that number means. So, like, honestly, saying that black people commit 46% of crime doesn't really mean what you think it does. It doesn't mean black people are inherently criminals. No scientist would ever say that, except really bad ones. It just means that black people are more likely to be poor and more likely to be put in situations that exacerbate criminality. Yeah, that's all that number means. But, like, a statistic is not an argument. A statistic is not an analysis. It's evidence of something, but people are just unable to unpack that evidence effectively. So you go, okay, well, I have this statistic that here says X, or scientists say, or studies show, or you even get the people who don't have any facts, but they assume that science is on their side because they're spouting status quo talking points. They assume that science is on their side. They go, oh, well, statistically, okay, well, what statistic? They go, well, statistics say, I've heard them somewhere. It's like, are you sure you've heard these statistics? I've had that conversation before. You don't need to show them to me. It's just like, are you sure you've read? Like, where did you read this? Like, are you sure? Like, are you sure that you read this? And if I show you, and that's the first question. If I show you evidence to the contrary, will you change your mind, or are you open to changing your mind, or are you just going to keep spouting the same thing at me and just ignore what I've said to you? Because if you're not open to changing your mind, you're not a scientist. You're not, because that's the thing. Oh, it's science versus religion. No, it's not. It's critical thinking versus fundamentalism. You can be a fundamentalist about science. You can be a fundamentalist about gravity. If nothing I tell you about gravity can change your mind about gravity, or if nothing I tell you about evolution can change your mind about evolution and the validity of it, you're not a scientist. You just worship evolution. You have blind faith in it, because evolutionary biologists are open to having their mind changed about evolution. It's what they do all day. And so, like, a large part of our society are science fundamentalists. They use science as a club to try to appeal to gain some authority, but they don't really understand the critical thinking aspect of science. The analysis part. Like the sort of the meat and bones of science. They just understand that it's something that our society says is important. That's off track.
But it's all right.
totally off track.
That's all right. All right. I think we covered everything. What you think? Poverty education. Yeah, I think we covered everything. We went through your solutions. We talked about the Green Party education 3 points. We talked about your interview with Mr. Baraka. We covered it all. Brandon, I'd like to thank you for your time. Let the folks know how they can get in touch with you.
Like I always say, you can find me under your bed at 1:30 in the morning, making that low moaning sound that goes a bit like that you often attribute to your house being old, or the wind, or maybe your dog got loose and is roaming around. But that's me.
That's Brandon.
That's Brandon under your bed, maybe in your closet. But do not look. Never ever look. Just don't do it. Alternatively, you can find me on Project Sanity every Thursday from 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern. You can follow me on Twitter, where I never tweet because I'm not a bird. You can follow me in real life. You can follow me in real life. I can't do the Twitter thing. Like, people, like, first of all, Twitter beefs aren't news, and I'm tired of hearing about Twitter beefs as if they are news. I don't care. I don't care. I don't care who that white-haired dude at Breitbart was picking on Twitter. This is not high school. I have a real problem. I can't afford my protein powder. I have a real problem. I'm not interested in two rich people arguing over who's right. Second of all, all Twitter has ever done for anybody is show you how dumb the people you admire are. Like, it
has done that.
All it's done is show you that, like, J.K. Rowling doesn't understand the world the way you think she does, even though she wrote Harry Potter, or that ASAP Rocky is a little bit dim about race relations, or that Neil deGrasse Tyson doesn't understand how fitness works. But
somebody doesn't pay attention to Twitter beefs. Sounds like you had a pretty good run down there, but
I'm just making these things up. I'm sure, see, that's the thing. I just picked the dumbest things I could think of, and if they've happened, they've happened. If not, people will just assume it.
You're a post-cog instead of a pre-cog. You're a post-cog.
That's a real thing. Post-cognition is a real thing. It's a real psychological. I mean, it's not a real thing. I mean, it may be a real thing. I don't know. I can't speak to that. It's a recognized type of being psychic.
Okay, I'm with you.
It was in Rose Red, the Stephen King book, with a post-cognition.
I read them.
No, so many series.
I thought I was making something up.
No,
yes, I'm a post-cog too.
Post-cognition, yeah.
I'm a post-cog too. Look at me. I'm a big boy now.
You're a big boy now. You know 5-syllable words.
There you go. Hey, that's it for the show. I'm gonna stop the broadcast. Me and Brandon continue to talk for a little while. Thanks for those of you who are watching, those internal folks. Who we got here? Let me get a little shout out here. Let me see who's watching. Jay LeBlanc, thanks for watching. Andre Roberge, thank you for watching. Pierre Jean-Jacques, thank you for watching. Thank you all for checking us out. Somebody else is watching. Huh?
What's with these French people?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah, because Canada's invaded. Canada invaded.
Qu'est-ce que c'est? Québécois?
All right. So I think that's it for the show. Okay, that's the end of the second half of the interview or discussion. Hope you enjoyed it. Brandon's a great guy, and hopefully in the future we'll hear from him again on other subjects. And please tune in next week and subscribe to us on YouTube, Spreaker, and anywhere else you see us. And subscribe to the Benjamin Dixon Show. Subscribe to Project Sanity, The Way with Anoa, and Podcast Revolution. Check them out. Podcast Revolution. All right. It's Michael Solomon, my dude. All right. That's it. Please, like I said, please subscribe to all those folks and check out all those places. And we'll see you next week.